Today we have Band Follies Memories with Tim Elliott and Shari Rarick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
We're going to do a quick sound check and a light check before we get started. So we just need to make sure from our video producer in the back if everything, the light okay?
Yep.
Good. Okay, good. So you ready? Okay, we're going to hold on this for a minute. Well, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'm just interested to see, I know we have some Follies alumni in here today, so raise your hand if you're a Follies alumni. Thank you for joining us. Wow. Thank you. And also, I guess I'm a double dip. We have some alumni chorus line. Thank you. And do we have some alumni jazz band members here today? All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. All right, Kurt, you can hit the lights now. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, and I'm Tim Elliott, and I'm director of Band Follies at Battle Creek Central High School. Band Follies has been a historical marker at for the Battle Creek Public Schools. Now going on 83 years. We are so excited to celebrate that. It's a historical and it is a vital part of the Battle Creek Public Schools, which is, you know, we've held on to that title for 83 years. Now this program has held its own as probably, and I did some little research, probably one of the longest running shows in this area. And I don't think that there's any other school in the area of Michigan that has had held this title or acquired this title. And then I was talking to some educators in other cities and stuff, and they say, wow, you guys have held on to that show for 83 years. So we're very proud to hold on to that title because it does hold its own as the pride of the state. So we thank you, all of you alumni, for participating and helping us to hold that title. On January the 21st in 1937, Band Follies was presented at W.K. Kellogg Auditorium, and this show was so popular, that it was given again on February the 16th of that same year. So, some more historical things went on. This was the band's campaign for new uniforms. They needed new uniforms, so they used this as a catalyst to get their new uniforms. And at that time, the Home Economics Department worked on the costumes. And at that time, Battle Creek Central had a printing department, so they did the programs. And the art department did the set. So it was basically a school-wide effort, and the program showcased the student talents. And at that time, the student talents were improvisations. They did tap dance. They did other musical numbers, including songs. And they also did a marimba solo. And I guess the choir did cathedral music. But that was done by the chorus. And yes, at that time, they did introduce what we do use today, MC, Master of Ceremonies. Now, the Band Follies at that time was under the direction of Mr. Edward Freed, who was the director of the speech department, and Mr. Paul Tammi, who was the director of the music department. And this was a position that Mr. Tammi held for 15 years. And the proceeds from this show went on to take care of the uniforms for the band. So we can change now. In 1939, and I hope that there's a little confusion sometimes with historical pieces, because as I was doing research, some years were inclusive of Follies and some years were not. So I don't know what happened to those yearbooks, but I'm going to find out. So I don't know. I really, this is like kind of bothered me, because I would go to find Follies in certain years and there was nothing there to recognize Band Follies. So you can see some interesting historical markers here today. And so November 16th and 17th, and this was interesting too. November 16th and 17th of 1939, they did Band Follies. And it was the second edition, but the question here is 37, 38, and we think that it would moved over 38 more, and they started in 37, and the show actually went on somewhere in there. There's a little misconception, but anyway, in 39 it was the second edition of Band Follies, and it provided to be one of the best attended high school events, which continued over the years. Acts that year included tumbling, jitterbugging. That interesting. You may see some costumes in there. And currently popular tunes at that time. And at that time, they had an 18-piece orchestra. And also, they did dramatic skits and some songs and other acts. So we can move on now. In 1940, the third annual Band Follies was presented on February. And again, we're back in February. And I don't know how that happened, 1940. And this time at WK, there was a capacity audience, and each act was a show by itself. This time they included magicians, there were vocalists, dancers, impersonators, musicians, comedians, and this was interesting. It goes back to my theater thing that I saw in New York, roller skaters. And they used baton twirlers, and all contributed to make the show a success. So we can move on. 1942, and we have another one for 1942. Yeah, you can go on to 1942. Okay. And then you may want to look, it was interesting. They had some interesting things going on. I think this was the course line, Sailor course line, I believe. Okay, go on, 44. Now that was a capsule of 1944, so it kind of shows a bunch of stuff going on in there. There's chorus line again. And let's go on now to 1950. Okay. Sure does. Okay, so hold on that one, please. In 1953, Sheffield Klein, who was the Battle Creek Central High School music teacher, he became Follies director. And he only held that position for 2 years. And you can move on. And in 1954, you can see that they used majorettes a lot. And hopefully that may bloom again this year, I'm hoping. Lavina Watson became the chorus line director. And this was a position she held for 5 years. And she held that position for 5 years. And from that position, it continues today as having a chorus line director, okay? So you read, oh, I'm sorry. So I think we can move one more slide. It should be at 1955, hopefully. And in that year, Charles Kirsch became the new Band Follies director. And that was a position that he held for 20 years. 20 years. He held that position for 20 years, okay? You can move on. And in 1959, that's a real capsule of 1959, Jean Gale became the chorus line director, but she only held that position for 1 year. So go on to 1960. Okay. Wilhelmina Spruill, this is another transition here, became the chorus line director for 1 year. So we move on, and we'll hold on 1962 for just a minute. In that year, J.R. Edwards, and I don't know, some of you may remember him. J.R. Edwards was the W.K. Kellogg Junior High School Director of Bands, and he became Band Follies director Charles Kirsch's. At that time, he needed more help, so he became the assistant Band Follies. So he helped Mr. Kirsch out during that time in 1962. You can move on. And in 1963, Diana Jenny became the chorus line director, but she only held that position for 1 year also. So guess what happened in 1963? Student Shari Rarick performed an acrobatic dance solo with Follies, and this was the first of a 3-year tenure as a performer. Now, in Follies jargon, we say she was a 3-year Follies veteran. So that happened in 1963. So we can move on to 64, I'm sorry. Student, now here's another one you may remember, Bruce Barney, student Bruce Barney. He was a student at that time. He played the trumpet in the Follies Jazz Band. And this for him also was the first of a 3-year tenure as a Follies performer or a Follies veteran. So in 1966, another historical marker happened. Former student, now remember we're 3 years out, and now in 1966, former student Shari Rarick became chorus line director. I think I got that right.
That's right.
And the interesting thing about that is that's a position she still holds today. All right, we can move on to 1968. All right, so this was, and the interesting thing about that, I could not, and in my research, could not always find out, because they left out a bunch of stuff sometimes, even in the yearbooks. I couldn't get all the themes that went along with these. Now, some of these, keep in mind, is the writing that they put in the yearbook. It does not necessarily indicate that that was the theme of the show, but you may be able to find in there, because see, if this was love, something. But see, up there they talk about, you know, something different. So it varies, so just watch out for it. So we can go on to 1969. Okay. And we'll move on to 1969, please. I think I told you that J.R. Edwards, he was the director. He helped bands at W.K. Kellogg. He became an assistant. Now they changed the title. He became an assistant production manager, and he held that position for 2 years. Okay, so we'll move on to the 70s. And things changed. Now, in these, I want you to watch, because one note I have in here that things, stage-wise, the sets were pretty involved. And if you look, as we get further in, the stage sets got even more elaborate. And I'll tell you stories about that. Okay, so 1970, you can move on. And 1970. Okay, so hold on that on 71. Now, in 1971, Bruce Barney, who is now, he was a former student, he became, I think Bruce was at, by now, I think he was at the high school. I think he was taking a position as, I don't know if he was an instructor at that time, but anyway, he took on a position of assistant production manager, and he held that position for 4 years. Okay, so 1972. Things got a little bit different there. Okay, and I think that was Mr. Kirsch. Can you go back for that minute? It's right there? Okay, all right. And so then you can move on to 1973. Now, because we're going to skip to 75, there is a problem because I could not, and by the way, in the corner over there is Eric Riley. Eric Riley went on to do Broadway. He was a member of the Follies cast. Eric, Dee Dee Flood, Randy Flood, and a couple of others actually went on and did Broadway. Eric was in Chorus Line. He was in Once on This Island, and I think he ended up doing some productions up there in New York himself. He's now been back, but I think he's still doing productions in New York. And I think we can move on. Oh, the other thing I was going to tell you, that there was a lot, there are going to be, I think I told you, some lost years in here because I don't know what happened with the history markers. They didn't pick them up. So go on to 73. Oh, we're on 75. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. We missed, somehow or another, there was nothing I could find between 73 and 75. Now, in 1975, Robert Peters, Bob Peters, the new Battle Creek Central High School, he was the director of bands, became Follies director. And that was a position he held for 13 years. Now, I'm not sure, I think we're going to hold on 1976. We'll hold right here because in 1976, Dave Adams, who was the new W.K. Kellogg Junior High School band director of bands, he became Follies jazz band director. He became Follies jazz band director, which is a position that he held for 11 years, and that jazz band director position continues today. And I started back around that time doing what we had at that time, Follies dance ensembles. We used to have production numbers, big, you know, the kids that didn't want to do solos would do dance ensemble numbers. They would get in these big dance ensemble numbers, and we did Rubber Band Man one year, and the kids loved it. We had a good time with it. So it was some interesting stuff. Some of you may remember that. All right, let's go to 1978. Hugh Jinks at that time, Hugh Jinks was the director right here. Dave Adams, Bob Peters, and me. I became, I think they moved me up to production manager. Now, probably they asked the question, what was production manager? Well, I was in charge of making sure that things ran, did the ensemble, supposedly did some other tasks that they had me doing. So it was a nice position. I enjoyed it. Hugh Jinks was the technical director. Now, let me bring this up to you, and most of you probably remember. At that time, in 1978, and a little bit, and even going back, the technical director was the technical director. We had students working the sound, the lighting, and the most impressive job was taking the spots and climbing all the way up to the top to the spot booth. Now, I sometimes, I did take, you know, as my cast came in, I would take students on that magical tour all the way up to the spot booth and tell them these ghost stories. They loved it. And I tell them stories. I would tell them stories about all the things that happened. And then there's one story, and it's probably around this time here. We were rehearsing on the stage, and all of a sudden, things started flying through the auditorium. And the students started, the girls especially, oh no, what's going on, Miss Elliott? And it was some bats. So I took the initiative to turn off the lights, and thinking that the bats would go away, so I moved the kids out back in the back area there, and the bats, we turned on the lights again, they came back in, the bats were still there. They were still flying through the auditorium. So then I said, okay, I'm gonna close the curtains. So at that time we had manual curtains, so we pulled them. You probably remember that we did the manual curtains and we pulled the curtains. And interestingly enough, the bats came somehow underneath the curtains and were on the stage. So the kids and the girls were screaming and hollering, and I moved them out in the back. So my technical director at that time was Todd Woodson. So he was working on some lighting or something. I said, Todd, I said, we've got a problem here. We've got bats. And he says, I'll take care of it. So I moved him out, and I came back in, and the bats had evidently flew up on the back wall back there in the backstage area, and the rest is history. They were officially with some wood smashed and done. And we had to do a cleanup. They were terminated. Yes, they were done. So we had some interesting stuff going on. So at any rate, I think we can go to we're on 1978. So those were the oh, and that's the year that Todd Woodson, he was a fantastic set designer, became technical director. Then we started getting these terribly elaborate sets. We did castles. We did our big huge arches. We had one year we asked to have sort of a New York set. So we had the lights in the back. They were very elaborate. Here's the problem we ran into, because, and it wasn't a problem at that time because students were assigned to stay after and do strike. Most of you probably remember strike. You would stay on Saturday night, strike the set, tear it up, and, put everything away. The other problem we had these huge backdrops. They were from Tobin's Lake. They were curtains. And sometimes we would use those. We had a fantastic fly system because we could fly them in. And These backdrops, we'd have to have all the students stand on stage after we've cleaned up the set and fold them up, put them in these big bags, big huge bag, roll them up, put them in the bags, and then I would have to take them down to the Greyhound bus station, and they would be shipped back to Tobin's Lake. Now before that, I would have to go to Tobin's Lake and bring them down here because Tobin's Lake wouldn't ship them. So we would have those behind, sometimes behind, in front of these big elaborate sets. So tearing them down, and as we get later on, as we get into it, I'll tell you some more stories about that. So at any rate, now we're on 19, I think we're on 19, where are we at? 78? So we can go on now to one more, I think it's one more 78 there. That was the year, is that 78? Yes, I think we did circus stuff, and then let's go on to 80. Is that 80? Yeah, that's 80. We did a circus theme, carousel theme, and the kids enjoyed that. And so we had all these carousel things in the back, and it was really a lot of fun. The shows are good, great shows. And I can't remember, we did a Western number that year, so that was, I think it was from Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. I think they did that one. Okay, so we go to 81. So 1981 was another historical marker. In 1981, Band Follies had to move. They had to move because of production, to move the production to McQuiston Learning Center, because the auditorium was in its renovation stage. They were remodeling it. So they moved us out, and we ended up doing the show at McQuiston Learning Center due to the W.K. Kellogg renovation. Now, the show was done in a cabaret format. So the band, we moved the band down front, and the stage was okay, but the problem, you know, the stage was different than the stage at WK. So the dancers and the students had to get used to that. This show was an interesting show because we created a cabaret style show with food and drink. Drink as in pop, okay? And so we had pizza. I think we had pizza served, and the students were waiters and waitresses, and they served, and that was a lot of fun. Because we needed to accommodate more people, because at that time when WK was there, it was seated 2,000 people. The interesting story I tell the students about it, they moved WK from 5 sections to 3 sections. There's section 1, 2, and 3. Well, when I would have to do the tickets, it was a nightmare. Because I'm serious, and that's an interesting story too. Tickets come from Ticketcraft, and I get the tickets, and once I get the tickets, then I have to open them and make sure that the seating is correct, because there's only a couple of people that can do that seating at WK Kellogg Auditorium, because it's so intricately involved. And so when I get the tickets, one time I looked at them and I called Mr. Barney. I said, Mr. Barney, I said, man, we got a problem here. They've sent the wrong schematic for the seats. So we were fortunate to get them out, get them back, and I had to change the actual pickup time because I had to wait on them to ship the new tickets in. So what would happen back during that time, we had 5 sections in WK. 5 sections. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plus we were doing the balcony, and the balcony is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I have this big ticket thing, and they all have to be put in, and it takes a while to do it. And so at that time, when they shifted the auditorium, they moved from 5 sections to 3 sections, which is fun, but you're still doing, I think, 5 sections at the top and 3 sections at the bottom. So we moved that show, and in order to accommodate the number of people, we had to run that show 2 weekends, and I think we ran 3 shows, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I think somewhere in there we may have had a matinee, so we accommodated that, okay? So we can move on now, 1981. And that's part of that 81, Club 81 series, 82, and 83, yeah, and 84, and 85, 86. And hold on that for just a minute. I think 86, nothing historical marker there. 87. Okay, we're gonna hold on 87 because 87 was our 50th anniversary. And that was the first time I think they've celebrated the 50th. It was entitled, it was a golden anniversary. So it was a big, big thing. Now I think that show was the first time we moved into our big matinees. We ran our matinees on Saturdays at 2 o'clock. Doing a matinee is fun because I've done several of them, and what happens with the matinees, logistically it's a lot of work because you have to work in a Friday night show, and then I have to change the rehearsal schedule so that it accommodates a matinee show, which means I have to bring the students in usually for their first call at around, I think it's around 11:30 or 12 o'clock, which means that officially everything changes so that their final notes usually start, I think, around 1:30, maybe 1:30. I have to call them into the gym or wherever, go over notes, give them a pep talk, and then they're on stage at 2 o'clock. Now, let me tell you a story about that, too. I found out that it is not a good idea to call them in with a 2 o'clock show, to call them in at 1:15, because there's too much of a lag time in there, and they tend to want to be ready and set to go. So I play games with it and figure it out so that when the last thing we do, we always get together in this big, huge, some of you may remember, I don't know if you did, but anyway, they get in a big, huge huddle after I've given them notes and Ms. Shari speaks and the band director, everybody gives them pep talks and stuff. We get in a big circle and we lock hands. And everybody has to lock hands. You have to lock hands theatrically, traditionally. If you don't, it can just destroy the show. You lock hands. I'm serious. It's a part of theater. We lock hands, and then and I tell them all yell it out, break a leg. Okay? So that has to be no more than 10 minutes before showtime. No more than 10 minutes, because I have to figure out logistically when they walk out that auditorium how much time it's going to take them to get down there, go down those steps, and get ready for the first act. The problem is if I do it 5 minutes before time, it is perfect because they are hyped and ready to go. But I've also found another little secret, because they have little treats out, and I treat them like professionals. So in the back, if you ever come backstage, you'll see lots of treats. Lots of treats. They have treats out there. And then at intermission, they get more treats. They get more treats because I want to treat them like professionals, because they act like professionals and they do a really good job. So they need to be uplifted. So what happened with that, we celebrated the 50th anniversary. It was a golden celebration. It was really a lot of fun. And so we added that matinee. And the other part of that matinee problem is you have to feed them right after. So the whole cast has to be fed, because there's only another window that they have to be ready for a 7:30 curtain. So logistically it works, but you have to be on a tight schedule. So they're eating, they go back and refresh makeup, get relaxed, and get ready for the next show. So those matinees are really a lot of work. So we did a matinee at that time. So go on, you can go on to 19. Okay, and that may be some of the, I think there's still some of the Golden Celebration right there. And another one is the Golden Celebration. That was a part of it too. And then we got to 88. Okay. And if you can look, you'll see some changes going on. And then another 89, I think that's 89. And then we're going to stop at 90. I think we're at 90, somewhere in there. Okay. So in 1990, Larry Caper joined the Follies staff, and he was just a plus for me. He was really good because he helped with advertising, and he did just a lot of different things. So I was just very pleased to have Larry on board with me. Larry and I, we would, and Brian and I would always meet somewhere and put the show together. But he became production manager. And this same year, Band Follies production theme was, we centered it on, I think I came up with the idea, the theme was TV. Now back during the time when I was production manager, I would always write those scripts. I'd have to sit down and write the whole script, take the theme, get the theme, write the whole script, and then pass it on to the MCs and make corrections. But this year, our theme for TV was, getting with them, was WBCC TV 90, which was W, Battle Creek Central, TV in the year of 1990. And this year was, we also encountered the dreaded snow. We encountered it, and I think we were locked out of rehearsals, and I had to reschedule and redo and bring the cast back and stuff like that. Also, Bruce Barney, Brian Busick during that year became Follies jazz band director. And Brian also played with the alumni jazz band sometimes, and he retired in 2017, and I just thoroughly enjoyed working with Brian because just before Follies, we figured out what was going on. I'd sit down with him most of the time down at the Brownstone and put the whole show together, and he was really a lot of hard work on his part with the jazz band, and I enjoyed working with him. Now in 1993, you can move on. In 1993, I was able to design the theme. I think, and I wrote the script for the show this year. I think I did that. Yes, I did. Because the theme this year was we toured and celebrated our own hometown, Battle Creek. And I entitled that show, I think, Destination Battle Creek. And that was interesting because we went all over Battle Creek and did some interesting little things in the script to enhance all of the performers that were doing different things like that. So you can go into 1995. In 1995, this was a very nice show. This is one of my favorites. It was called After Hours. I don't know where I came up with that one. I don't know. I think it had something to do with New York. But I thoroughly enjoyed the design of this show. It was just really nice. It was called After Hours. Okay. I think you can move on now. It's 1995. I think that's still part of After Hours in 1996. Now, 1996, am I on 1996, I think? We did an interesting show that year called Circus. And the set design, again, was very elaborate. They would build these big sets. And as time progressed, I had to change that because students became stars. Now, back in the day, students would be dedicated to staying and doing the set. And, you know, if you were assigned to clean the dressing rooms, if you were assigned to tearing down the set, you do that. Well, these students now were beginning to be starstruck. And they were truly starstruck because I remember one night, and I can't remember what year that was. I think it was getting close to the 2000 years. Larry and I had to stay after with a handful of students and tear down the set. Well, Todd and then Tom Wood came in. He was a fantastic set designer also. Tom built these huge sets, and they would build them out of this styrofoam. And then they would paint them, and they would just be so decorative and look so authentic. And so then we'd have to tear down that set, break up all that styrofoam, put it in these big, huge garbage bags, take them out, put them in the dumpsters in the back. And there was a handful of us. So Larry and I left at probably about 3 o'clock in the morning because I have to have everything set and ready to go. Can't, you know, on Broadway, if you do a set, you come in, and for example, let's take those of you who've seen Hamilton or Wicked. That set is set, okay? When you lease that theater, and it is exactly clear. It's exactly clear. Then you go in, you say, I want to lease it, $100,000, whatever. and you lease it and you build these elaborate sets. But when that show closes, you have to tear down every single piece, put back every single piece of wood the way it was before you came in. So by right, we have to leave WK Auditorium the same way we found it before we came in. So we were stuck there till 3 o'clock in the morning, cleaning up, making sure all the dressing rooms were set, and we walked out. That's when I decided that we had to change that formatting and went to a more simple set. A more simple set, because it just wasn't working, because the students would be looking for them, and they were off and running with their bags like stars and divas, running out to Steak and Shake so they could sit down and have memorable moments. So we had to deal with that. So I cut that out, and I started using more simplified sets, okay? So we're on 1999 now, I think. Yeah, 1997. Yeah, and you can go to 1999. And they started doing color in the yearbooks too, and I thought that was nice too, okay? And in 2000. Now 2000 was a celebration year because that year we introduced the millenniums. So they came in and they were part of the cast as millenniums. I think we did something special that year, but I can't remember exactly what. In 2001, you can move on. In 2001, this is a very interesting year. It's a very, very exciting year for me, but in 2001, I asked the 2001 cast, I asked them to, we need to pay tribute to the 9/11 tragedy that happened in New York. And in 2001, the Band Follies MCs, along with the cast, participated in a very moving, a very touching, and an emotional tribute to the people that lost their lives in the 9/11 tragedy. And so at that time, we wanted to do something special. So I had all the cast members, they came out, and they actually presented flowers to the guests in the audience, all of our audience. The sideline to that was I understood that there was some people in there that had to leave because they had ties with some of the people that were involved in the 9/11 tragedy. We didn't know that, but they never said anything about it, but that's what I heard. But it was a very moving, a very touching experience, and the students were just great with that. So you can move on to 2002. I did Rhythms of the Night, and I love that. I love that. This year I added some special Follies guests. There were some special Follies guests. And so the special guests were the counselors. They were the counselors at Battle Creek Central High School. And I kept talking to them, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And so they came in and they entertained us with their talents, and they did dances and things like that. I'm not sure if we have, Dave Dillman is in one of these pictures in here. He and Mrs. Stahl, they did a beautiful dance, and so they did a lot of fun. Brenda Jackson helped out with that, and she's kind of helped start that trend because she said, we can do it. That year was this is one of my favorite years because that was a very special performance from cast member Matt Bogart. And Matt Bogart allowed me to open up the organ. And I was just too excited because that's another logistical thing. You have to get the organ okayed historically. It opened up, and Matt Bogart came in and did some beautiful, I mean, he was fantastic on that. And I think I asked him if he would do a Mozart piece. But the other thing that was so special, Todd Woodson was my technical director, and I asked Todd if we could do some special lighting. So he said, sure. He says, let's do this. So what he did, Todd went up, and I don't know if any of you know that there are chambers on this, in the auditorium on the side, and he climbed up and did special lighting in all of those chambers. And then he did some color tiles and things. And so both sides of that, so when Matt got on the organ, the lighting director at that time cued so these chambers would change lights as Matt was playing on the organ. That was very special. I was just so, and I've never forgotten Matt Bogart on that organ. I have never forgotten him. So he was just great. I've been trying to get him to come back, but I can't find out. The last I heard, he was in Ann Arbor. So if anybody knows where he's at, I'd love for him to come back as an alumni guest. Okay, so you can move on now. So we're 2002, 2003. And those are twin sisters right there. I forget their name. Tanisha and Tania, I believe. Yes. And another 2003. And then we hit 2006. Okay. And you can see Drumline over there, 2007. That year, the theme was City Lights. That was another one. And I guess, interestingly enough, I got that theme, and I borrowed that theme from, some of you probably remember, City Lights. That's where I used to go and write at the top of McCamley. Yeah. So I used to go up there and have creative moments. I'm serious. I would actually sit by the window, and I could write whole shows just sitting there looking out the window and figuring out, oh, okay, we can do this and do that. Because artists, sometimes you have creative moments in different places. A lot of times I would have good creative moments down at Brownstone because it was quiet and serene. And I've also had some interesting creative moments in the library. But that City Lights, just kind of just looking out over the city and seeing the lights, I said, this is it. It's going to be City Lights. Okay. So in 2009, we did, was that 7? Oh, I'm sorry, 2007. We did, 2007 was Decades, A Journey in Time, and I like that theme too. In 2010, we did, got 2010? If it's coming. No, you got 2010, should have, that's it, right, so we good with that. 2010, we did The Rhythms of the City. And in 2012 was our celebration year. And so I titled that show Encore Diamond Jubilee, Encore Diamond Jubilee. And that year we had Battle Creek, we celebrated its 75th annual show. And our special guest was the Alumni Chorus Line and the Alumni Jazz Band. And then we had some other special guests there too. And then 2014, was the 77th, and we did the music of the night. And again, that year, that was interesting because I was able to open up the organ again because in the auditions, I was shocked. So I go in auditions, and I'm sitting there, and the young man came up and said, on the sheet, he said he wanted to do the organ. I said, well, I didn't know. Would you mind doing your piece on the piano? And so he did on the piano. It was fantastic. So he was in the show, but when I got ready to do everything, I had to have the organ chambers opened up. And that was Ethan Fletcher. And Ethan Fletcher had just come in with his dad, who was then at that time the principal at Battle Creek Central High School. So I was so excited to have another organist. So I had Ethan, I think, for 3 years, maybe 3 years. So he was a 3-year Follies veteran, and he did an excellent job on that organ. And then in 2015, we did Time Travelers, and that was really fun because if those of you that came, we took you on a journey, and we did a flight. And so the MCs, I remember the MCs, wanted to be flight attendants. And I said, okay, fine, we can do that, and we figured it out. So they actually did. They wanted to say, Mr. Can we do that? You know, the flight. I said, sure. So we had that in the plan, and if you're to the left, you're to the right, and then in the back, exit signs are in the back. They did all of that, and that was a good cast. That was good. And then we did Once on This Island. That was an interesting show because we had I think that year we had a lot of cancellations. I think I had to cancel out because of rehearsals, because of snow, and then we had to move the show to the snow dates, which are the next week. So we had to move the snow dates. And in 2017, we celebrated again, and I got to thinking, I said, you know what? This show is on the wheels of a dream. So I themed it on the wheels of a dream. And again, that year on the 80th, we had special guests, the alumni, I think Jazz Band, and Alumni Chorus Line. So they came back plus some other people. And in 2018, we did the music, Magic and Memories, and I like that name. And that cast was a special with me. Then all of a sudden, from 2016 up to, I think it was the building of 2016, that cast was building. And those girls, the ladies came out, that was the most beautiful gowns that they presented in their vocals. Each one, it was like a fashion statement. They had the most beautiful gowns, and I told them, I said, this was absolutely beautiful. The way that they all had those colors, and it was just a great cast. I just loved them. And then in 2019, we did One Moment in Time. Now, that was special because I don't know why, but it happened with me when I was creating, I said, One Moment in Time. Now, this was very special because that was 2019, because in 2019 it was a very emotional show. It was very emotional because many of those students that started, the interesting thing about that, they started as freshmen. They started as freshmen. I remember them coming in to audition, and they were just all over the place. They were not perfect, but I saw something in them, and I said, there's something there. So they were cast in the show as freshmen. They came back sophomore, junior year, and each year it was a pleasure to see them grow. They just grew. Their talents enhanced. They just grew, and their performances over years, they just blossomed. So I was very pleased with that. It was a very talented cast, and I didn't want them to leave. I really didn't want them to leave. I was so hurt because in 2019 I knew that I was getting ready to graduate a bunch of seniors, talented seniors, because their cast was just overflowing with seniors. I didn't want them to leave. So there were a lot of tears at final rehearsals and at the final cast call that night, Saturday night. But also a lot of tears because when they're in rehearsal, I usually am sitting down front and they're on the stage, and when they finish doing whatever, I usually say, that was good, maybe you need to tone this up or whatever. But I moved them closer to the front and I shared with them that one moment in time, and I told them, each one, how I just was so impressed with the way that they had grown and they had been responsible, dedicated, and committed to the show, and how they took on leadership. Then the tears started coming. So I had to hold back. So they were on the stage and they said, Mr. Elliott, hold on a minute. And then they had to go off and I had to get to the tissues, and they came back, and I was telling them, because there was that one moment in time, and I said, you've had that one moment in time. I said, but now I am going to release you because you do have to move on. You know, and there's nothing I can do to hold you back. But I want you to stay. And I want you to stay and do some more. So it was a good cast. I mean, I was so impressed with them, and they were just a great cast. I will never forget them. Like I said, I was able to thank each one for their growth, commitment, their dedication, responsibility. They took on leadership roles. And now the MCs, they have to, a part of their commitment is I have them write script. They have to do the script along with my creative moments that I tell them what I need and whatever. But they have to write, and that's a part of the process that I wanted to add, because I wanted to add an educational piece to it, because now they put their writing skills in place, and they do an excellent job with that writing. And then they now help out with the set design, which we've simplified now. If you've been to the shows recently, simplified. So a lot of times I turn that over to them with my guidance, and they do the set designs. And then, like I said, at that last, I think it was, you probably remember that last cast meeting, we had lots of tears. And that was the reason being because at those cast meetings, and some of you may remember, I don't know if you did this, but maybe you did. I always introduce the seniors, and I always have them in that big circle I told you about. I always call out the seniors. Seniors, would you come out and thank them, and moving on, and we want you to do great and all this. And then the interesting part about it, the kids love to come out, as I say, If you are a 1-year Follies veteran, they'll step out, a 2-year, 3-year. But the biggest accolades come when the 4-year Follies veterans step out. They step out in that circle, and the kids all applaud because they're 4 years Follies veterans, and they have done an excellent job. So that's Band Follies, 1937 up to 2019. Thank you. All right. So I asked, thank you. I asked Ms. Shari Rarick Gysel and Mr. Jim Gysel, who can do, Ms. Shari Rarick is the course line director, to share some moments with us about her experience. And then Mr. Jim Gysel has been so helpful in bringing back the alumni jazz band. He's going to talk too. So, Ms. Shari, you want to come on up? Thank you.
Well, Tim has done such a fabulous job with the overall, and not only just with the history, but what he gives the students is just marvelous to watch them. Can you hear me in the back?
No,
Yeah. You got it.
Oh, for the
Yeah,
camera.
clip it on so you can come on over this.
Oh, dear.
Hold on, I'm gonna give you some.
Okay. So as I was saying, Tim has just been wonderful working with the casts and seeing their talents, and it's been wonderful to watch them grow. And he'll expand their horizons and ask them to try things they've never tried before, and encourages them in so many ways that it's just wonderful to see it on stage. Working with the chorus line has been just a fabulous extension of my life, so to speak. I know we have quite a few people here today that have participated in the chorus line in particular. And I can't talk about it without mentioning a little bit of the history of what I have been informed of for the chorus line. My understanding is the very first performance of Band Follies was with so many of the students doing everything with drama department doing skits, art department doing backdrops, band, of course, vocal department. The gym class was actually the chorus line, and home ec did the costumes. And we were so blessed until just a couple years ago that we had in chorus line a member of the very first Band Follies, Grace Van Drat, was in home ec. And I think it was her senior year. I can't remember which year for high school for her. But she was in the home ec department, and they made the chorus line costumes. And over the years, they've had, according to the choreographer, they've had different costumes done. And we have quite a few samples out there if you look in the displays that are up. But Lavina Watson, who was one of the choreographers, was my instructor. I grew up with Lavina from the time I was 3-4 years old. And by the way, she is still dancing today, and she's closing in on 90 soon. And she, in her later years, she's been teaching Golden Zumba down in Indiana. And she's had knee surgery and I think hip surgery, and still manages to keep being the ever-ready bunny. So that's just delightful. The costumes over the years, I know that under Lavina's instruction, part of the time Jane Pyatt did the costuming. And somewhere in that period of time, Charlie Kirsch asked a crew of them who were Follies seamstresses to make a flag for the marching band that covered almost all of the football field, and they unfolded it. So the Follies seamstresses did that, and my mom and Grace were among those people involved. And then as time went on, Grace and my mom, Mary Rarick, did the majority of the costumes. And the dancers, the chorus line members, were asked to bring a sheet from home, which was used as lining for the costumes. And the older costumes you'll see as you exit on the door out to your right as you go out. If you look inside, you will see that there are sheets that have taken the lining so it held the seams. And I would hear the costume ladies talk about, those girls are working so hard, they had to take them in again and again. And they would have like 4 seams. There would be a center seam and then 2 here and 2 here, and then the back seams. And the zippers put in, and they would have to cut the legs out. And once in a while, the legs would be cut a little bit close. So we had to be very careful on that and run the elastic through. And that was very fun. Also with having the alumni coming in, I can tell you some of the most special years watching and being a part of working with them. These ladies have had memories that go back to high school, of course, but would have a chance to relive high school in a special way. And friendships of a lifetime are made in the middle of Band Follies. And I can tell you that several years, well, one year in particular, I think it was our second alumni gathering, we had 2 generations at once dancing at the same time. And I would line them up, tallest to short. And then I would every other one to the end of the line. So we built the pyramid. And then we would go into formations and pull forward every other one. And then we went into pinwheels. And do you know, if I had tried to do this, it wouldn't have happened. So God Almighty had his finger in the pot. And we ended up with those pinwheels and those mothers and daughters beside each other. I don't know how it happened, but it did. Yeah, it was just really wonderful. And over the years, and we have a member here, Kim, had her daughters have been in chorus line. So we, through the years, we probably in other acts, through the many thousands of people that have gone through this special program, have probably many generations, probably 3 and 4 generations through between band and dances other than chorus line and other acts. So it's just such a special program. With the music, transitioning into the music, we had a former student that graduated and went on professionally, and Mr. Kirsch found him and asked him to write music, arrange it special for Follies. and he did usually at least 1 or 2 pieces for chorus line and for the band, a specialty band. I'll let Jim talk about that because he played the actual pieces on that. And those of you that don't know, I met this wonderful man in band at Band Follies.
You did.
And I will transfer this microphone. Didn't know we had this part, so this is great.
Tell them about, real quick, can you tell them about it when we do each one of our anniversary years, those historical pieces that we put in the program, you know, with all the mishaps, can you tell about that?
Yes, we do have, and there is a sample of one out in the display. The former captains of the chorus line gathered together some statistics and how many legs were involved and how many children, how many years added up, how old the line was. And they're just really great, fun stats. So you might want to make sure that you take a look at that. That is on display. And so I'll turn this over to Jim Gysel.
Thank you. Thank you, wife. Well, it was fun because I played in the band in 63 and 64. I didn't make the cut in 62 because my grades weren't good enough. My sophomore year. You had to have grades at a certain level to be in the Follies band. And Charles Kirsch, and that, I guess that's part of what I wanted to say, was the guy that was instrumental in a lot of ways, that was here for 20 years, was Charles Kirsch. And he did a fabulous job, both with the marching band and the concert band, but especially with Follies. He took an inkling to it, and I think it just captivated his life. I think it might have killed him, I'm not sure, because he died at a pretty early age from diabetes. But Kirsch had a level of excellence that it's been fun to watch Tim at work doing Follies, because the excellence that you bring to the job is very similar to the work that Charlie Kirsch did way back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. The man that Shari was talking about that did the arranging for the Follies band was a guy by the name of Jack Kimmel. He was an arranger and did a lot of work on Broadway. And so he was constantly writing music for Broadway shows. But somehow Charlie had a relationship with him because he was an alum of Battle Creek Central. And so every year, like Shari said, he would write at least a couple of tunes for either the Follies band or for the chorus line. And what was really exciting for us when we played in the alumni band just a few years ago, a couple of those arrangements that we played actually were Jack Kimmel arrangements. Handwritten, yeah. In some of the charts, you know, the people had spilled pop on it and water and stuff, and you could see the ink running. And so we actually had to photocopy some of it before it got ruined. And I'm not sure where those charts are at now, Tim.
Actually, some of them are still in the music building.
Are they really?
Hopefully.
Hopefully they're still there in the music building. And I know some of them were cared for somehow, but...
It's still interesting, man. I don't know. They haven't pulled any of those out because I think they're a little bit too hard for the mastery of these.
Yeah, it might be. And they were big. Yeah, they were big charts. But they were excellent, and it was really fun to play them. You know, you were talking about organists. When I was in school, there was a guy by the name of Brent Hilton. I don't know if that name rings a bell with anybody else, but Brent Hilton was a fabulous student organist, and they opened up that organ for him too, just like you talked about these other two gentlemen. And he did a fugue, and he went on with his classical music, became a fabulous choir master and teacher, and just a year or so ago finished a great career at a mega church in Phoenix, Arizona. And Brent has had a great career in music and has stayed with the keyboard and done a fabulous job. There's a couple of other people that I wanted to mention that were crucial in putting this Follies band together for the alumni band, and that was Eric Campbell. And Eric, I don't think, well, he moved to Detroit, comes back to Battle Creek a little bit, but today he's a terrific trumpet player, played with me in the Lou Boyd Swing Band, but he's playing now with the, it's a takeoff, you know, like our brass band at Battle Creek. Well, there's a Motor City brass band. Eric Campbell plays with that group today. And they are terrific, and if you ever get a chance to hear them, they do play in Battle Creek once in a while, and they've played usually at the St. Phil Church, which has terrific acoustics, and it's a great thing to hear. So Eric has been involved with that. Also a guy by the name of Jay Wentworth. And Jay was, I think he's still in the Battle Creek area, another great trumpet player. He is at Penfield. Now, is he teaching?
He's teaching in Penfield. Yeah.
Great, okay. Well, I didn't know that. And he did, I know he did some excellent work too. It's funny how Follies sticks with you. It becomes part of your life, I think. Just last night, I played a gig with the Lou Boyd Swing Band. We were temporarily over at Riverside Country Club because of the reconstruction that's going on at the Cool Family Center. But sitting next to me last night was Keith Cole, who I sat next to in Follies Band in 1963 and 64. These old trombonists just never give up, you know. And what was so fun for me is when I moved back to Battle Creek in 1993, Lou Boyd, who was a member of the church that I served as a pastor, Lou came to me and said, hey, I'm reconstructing the big band I used to have. Would you consider playing with me? And I said, Lou, I haven't played my horn for 30 years. He says, well, you can do it. And I picked it up, and by the way, it just came back. But it took a lot of practice, and it still does. And as Shari knows, I've practiced almost every day to try and stay with it today. But it's been a joy for me and a real privilege to talk with you today. And Tim, thank you so much for inviting me, and a great job today with your program. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Is Brian here? I invited Brian. He's back in town. Is he here to Brian Busick? Or Bob Peters or Larry? Neither one of them are here? Okay. So I just want to do a couple of little things and then we'll be done. I think I have to put this back on here somehow or another. There we go. Just a couple of little things. The students that are involved in Follies, like Shari said, there are thousands. There are thousands of them, and I love to see them come back as alumni to the shows and stuff. And usually they come backstage. So, or I see them somewhere and I'll say, help me with that name. And then they'll say, I was in Follies. I says, and what show was that? So usually if they tell me what show, I can kind of go back and do it. But a lot of students that have come through Follies have done an excellent job with the talent. But the thing is that the excellence comes in the fact that they have moved on in their careers. And a lot of them have told me that this was a catalyst to get confidence built and to, you know, feel good about themselves when they were in Follies. It just revived them, and they went out and they are doing fantastic things. So Follies members are all over the place, and they're there. A couple of little trivia things. I want you to trivia through the exhibit. And the interesting thing about that, if you look, see if you can find how Follies admission prices have changed. I found somewhere out there in my research, we haven't changed. We changed it. I changed it a couple of years ago because I got approval, and I changed it. We're $8 now, but that's, you know, the times because we had to pay for. Oh, let me tell you this. Because we moved from the technical, you know, remember I told you students were doing the tech. We are now into the union. They run that sound lighting, and I have to pay them out of my budget for every minute that they're sitting in that auditorium. If I decide that we're doing a special show and I want to use the screens, there's an extra cost. It's very expensive, you know, because we have to do that, but you know, every year I have to deal with that because that's just a part of it now. We don't have any control. The students cannot even look at that soundboard, look at that lighting booth. They can't even, I don't even allow them to go back there because I don't want to hear about it. I'm serious, because if they go back there, then they run over to the administration and say, Mr. Elliott had those students. No, they don't go, they know, they don't go past that halfway marker in the auditorium because it's just too much. And they understand that, and they tell me now that there's a new thing that they're gonna have them over there because they put in a new sound system and they don't want anybody back there. So I gotta fight that, I gotta deal with that. So we were gonna do that. But I want you to trivia out and see if you can find the 50-cent Follies admission. There's a $1.75 Follies admission. And somewhere out there, there's a $1 admission. I'm serious. Look at the posters and look through some of the articles and stuff, and you will see that Follies, to get into Follies was 50 cents. They want 50 or 75. I think I'm pretty sure there's a 75 out there. You can do that too. But I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you, and to extend my special thanks to everyone that contributed so many special Band Follies items and memorabilia to the exhibit, and thank you all for being here today. Kurt, did you want to say anything, share anything with us, Kurt? Is Kurt here? Kurt was in Band Follies, and he helped out putting some of the memorabilia together. Battle Creek Central Alumni Association, I want to thank them for sharing their memorabilia with us. Sandra Ranger, is Sandra here? Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing with us. I appreciate that. Sam, is Sam here? Sam Geis, I believe it's Geis. Thank you. Kurt, did you want to share anything about your father's experience with us?
No.
Thank you, Kurt.
Tell the stories I could tell, I can't tell them in front of this group.
Yeah, they are some interesting stories.
We had fun.
I know you did. I know you did. Oh, and then the other thing before you go, you probably remember I have outlawed, and because of whatever, I outlawed in their when the students finish auditions and they are casting the show, they get this information packet and they have to sign their names, and it says on there are no Follies parties. Follies parties.
Oh, the hell with that. That was the reason I was in Follies.
No, we can't have any Follies parties anymore. Something happened, and I was instructed by administration, no. Yeah, they did.
Well, Tim, I think that was at our parties. That's when something happened. So ask Dave. Dave Bell here. He can tell you about some of those parties. He was wearing the chorus line costume.
Oh, really? You want to share that experience with us?
No, but I can tell you that in the 70 to 73 years that I was involved with Follies, you talked about how that carries on throughout your life in different ways. Leadership, teamwork, and things like that. It truly does.
It does. It really does.
It really shaped me. Anytime I can come back and watch and see something like this, I would never have known about this had somebody not posted it on Facebook.
I know.
So I made a point to drive up here today.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I want to thank you. I want to thank these people real quick. Kirsch, Battle Creek High School Alumni Association for sharing. Sandra, I told Sam, Shari Rarick Gysel, thank you. Jim, thank you. Shari Roberts for helping out with getting us that alumni. We appreciate that. And Cam, with the librarian at Battle Creek Central, who was helping me out with a lot of stuff. I was able to, in my stuff, was able to bring a bunch of memorabilia here also. Is it Mark Cougar? Mallory Cooper. Thank you, Mallory, for sharing. We appreciate that. Costumes are on display. The Regional History Museum for hosting this exhibit. We appreciate that. Bob and Roberta. Thank you.
Jim and Roberta.
I'm sorry. Jim and Roberta for hosting us too. Sue Healy. Is Sue here? Sue. Thank you for sharing your costumes. We got those Doug Stewart event. And Tracy, thank you. For your technical know-how. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. But thank you all for being with us today. And enjoy the exhibit and continue. Band Follies will be off. Oh, Band Follies is supposed to be up. Auditions start next week. Huh? Auditions start next week. They've been posted. I got an interesting part. Now we have the message board at the high school, so I can loop all of my things, because the boards in front of, and by the way, you will not see any announcements at WK, because they have to figure out how to deal with that board out there. The board at the high school is non-functional also, so they're working on that. So I was able to get all my audition stuff up in the message board at the high school, those of you that have been down there. But we're going to do that. But I want to also thank Battle Creek Public Schools for continuing this historical marker, because it is really a historical marker for the students as well as for Battle Creek Public Schools, because it's a real big part of Battle Creek Central High School and the Battle Creek Public Schools. So thank you all so much for being here today.
Tim,
enjoy. Yes.
What are the dates of the 2020?
Oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Thank you. I used to tell the students that too. Thank you. This year we're running January the 10th and the 11th. January the 10th and 11th. And hopefully that information, like I said, won't be on the message board out there in front of the auditorium, but it'll be in the shopper, and I'm going to work on some other avenues to make sure that you have the dates of Follies. January 10th and 11th, 2020. And we will be doing a 2020 something. We're working on that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But enjoy all the refreshments, and thank you again. Okay, thank you.